Andy Finn, are you still in the back? Can you hear me? How's the sound in the back? Good? All right, great. We are here to talk a little bit about operations. Specifically, we're going to focus on technology today because there's a lot of things that are really becoming even more important since last year. I'm going to introduce our panel really quick. Again, I'm Jennifer Gordon. I'm with Lincoln Property Companies. And to my left, we have, in order, you guys aren't in the order I wrote, hold on. We have Jim Soderberg. He is the principal of Soderberg Apartments Specialist, owning and operating about 2,000 homes in the Twin Cities. Next, we have Cecil Smith, who's the president and CEO of MMHA, as well as a small owner and operator of naturally occurring affordable housing in Minneapolis. Next, we have Mark Laverty, who's a developer with Saturday Properties, a boutique development and management company in the Twin Cities. Tony Conary is next. He's a VP of sales with SmartRent, which is the industry's largest smart home provider. They've provided over 300,000 homes with different smart home technologies such as smart home self-guided tours, access control, smart parking, and building-wide Wi-Fi. All of some things we'll be touching upon today. And last but not least, we have Nicole Skyberg, who is a director with Greystar. They manage nearly 8,000 apartment homes in the Midwest and nearly 800,000 units nationwide. So welcome to our panel. Thanks you guys so much. As we got together and talked about operational things, we kept coming back to the technology piece. And specifically, there were a few areas that we thought were important to highlight. A few of those things you'll hear about today are smart home technology, self-guided and virtual tours, electric car charging stations, and how to future-proof your buildings, and fiber, cable, Wi-Fi, and some of those topics. But we know that, as we've heard earlier today, rent control is definitely something that's on your mind, and we want to touch on that from an operational perspective. And so we are going to start actually with Cecil giving us a bit of an update. Cecil, you can hear there's still a lot of confusion. When do you think that owners and managers are going to have some clarity, and what are you hearing from owners and managers across the Twin Cities right now?
Excuse me. What everybody wants is certainty. And that message has been heard loud and clear, certainly in St. Paul. It's the one message that we're getting from the council members that they've heard, that the market is demanding. We need certainty. They have 3.5 months to get to certainty. I'll be honest, I'm not sure they're going to get there because May 1st is the effective date of the ordinance, and they can't make any changes or fix anything, repeal anything, which is obviously what we would ideally want, until November 3rd of 2022. So the ordinance as it's written is what everybody has to work with. Now, they are getting creative, and this gets to the operations side. So just before Christmas, there was a very contentious hearing because the mayor's staff did not show up in St. Paul to the city council meeting. And instead, a letter was sent over that basically reiterated what had happened 2 weeks earlier. And the deputy mayor wrote to say the immediate focus is going to be on areas that will need to be in place as we work towards implementation, including needs around definitions, rules, market analysis, staffing, budget considerations, monitoring and evaluation, and the potential of a self-certification reporting system. Need some water. Self-certification. How is that possible in a rent control regime? And it still be rent control, because you will be able to self-certify if you need an exemption, is essentially what they're talking about. So again, no details. If anything, that adds a little bit more to the confusion, but perhaps reduces a little bit of the heartburn that folks are feeling around rent control in St. Paul. There's clearly discussion around a new development exemption. But again, let's talk about definitions. What's new development? A certificate of occupancy after May 1st, 2022, or 5 years ago? What's new development? In fact, what is even rent? Net rent, gross rent, RUBS, fees? They don't even know what that is. And the ordinance doesn't specify it. So they know they need to get to certainty because all of those questions and all of those processes remain out there. And we have 3.5 months to get it figured out, or at least they do. In Minneapolis, they're seeing what's happening in St. Paul. And I was even on a call last night where one of the council members' aides who did not sign the letter that was in the Star Tribune, that was authored by 5 council members demanding that we implement St. Paul's regime in Minneapolis, said we've got to get to something that's going to work. We can see what is happening in St. Paul. So the chaos, the draconian nature, and the terrible impacts that's happening in St. Paul is serving as a cautionary tale in Minneapolis. And I think the advocates are realizing that they're very unlikely to achieve the same result in Minneapolis as they got in St. Paul. So the process in Minneapolis, the charter amendment said the city council is empowered to enact it, but their own city attorney said that's probably illegal and then said it publicly. Or you can put it back on the ballot. For it to be on the ballot in November of 2022, they have to have it ready for the ballot by August. So they're on a very short timeline to develop whatever their alternative is from the St. Paul framework. So that's everything's moving on a very fast track. There is going to be a lot more turmoil, unfortunately. But if anything, that turmoil aids in hopefully the policymakers realizing this is unworkable. This is highly destructive. There's major economic impacts that we're already feeling. And, you know, the absurdity of it all, and you saw it in the first session with the data that we saw there, was we have the lowest rent growth market. There are rent controlled cities that have higher rent growth than we do. But we're implementing rent control. It's a tragic irony that's happening to our market with the rent control policy. And certainly, you know, there's national attention on this. There's a number of us in this room that are heading to Orlando next week. There'll be lots of discussion about the fact that rent control now has gone outside the coastal markets and into the heartland, and what that means, because there's concern in Chicago, because there's lots of pressure in the Illinois legislature. This is what's happened in our market has raised national concern, because people have seen the playbook here. Get it on the ballot, get it passed. And despite a very robust campaign that many of you contributed to, the voters in these very liberal core cities want to vote with their hearts and not their heads, even though it hurts people. Rent control hurts the poorest of our members of our community. It hurts the long-term growth and stability in the housing supply that is needed for economic prosperity in these markets, even for the lowest income members of our community. And so that's very, very disappointing that we weren't able to connect with people's heads. we're hoping that that will happen with the policymakers.
Hey, Cecil, I just want to say on behalf of all MHA members, just thank you so much for all of the communication that you've been sending out. If you are not an MHA member or getting their weekly communication, please consider it. It's been such a great source of information. They're constantly posting links to the most up-to-date information. It's really helpful. They're doing a lot on the front lines, and we're super grateful for all of the work. So thank you. We'll continue to stand behind you in that. And while we do that, we'll continue to assess our risks on a daily and weekly basis as we are pricing and renewing and leasing our apartments. There is an Advocate magazine coming out shortly, and it's going to focus all on rent control. So if you really want to know some ins and outs, there's going to be some really great letters from national leaders across the country. Please take some time to look at that. And I think, Cecil, you had one quote maybe from that Berkeley letter that was really compelling.
Yeah, so we've been talking to different markets around the country, asking them to contribute to the next issue of the Advocate magazine. And just this morning, we got the article from the Berkeley Property Owners Association, and their executive director penned the article. And the closing remark in that piece was, take it from those on the front line, your business just got harder. We kind of all knew that, but it's the reality is most of us in this market have never dealt with rent control. Even some of the institutional investors, national investors, have avoided rent control markets. There's only a few operators and owners in this market that have rent control properties in other markets. So it is all new to us. We are all on the learning curve, including the policymakers.
We're looking forward to April 30th, which is when I personally believe it'll all be defined, and we'll know before we have to implement it on May 1st. So it's probably about as soon as we're going to know, but we're looking forward to it. So thank you, Cecil. We are going to hop on to some different operational topics. Specifically, we want to talk about technology. Technology is just not something that we can avoid anymore. It has to be embraced. It's not optional. It's absolutely a requirement. And I went to the Ops Tech conference recently, the MMHA Ops Tech conference. And if you are ever looking for a great technology conference to attend, that is phenomenal. It's at the end of November, and it was 2 days of really great information. So I highly recommend it. We're going to talk a little bit about smart home tech. And fortunately, we have an expert on our panel in Tony. And so Tony, we're all trying to create operational efficiencies here through our technology, but there's a cost and we need to prove the return on the investment to justify it. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing to create operational efficiencies through technology and the ROI associated with it?
Yeah, so I would start this out by kind of defining smart tech, that it's really about saving time, saving money, and generating revenue. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, because smart tech isn't just a smart lock. It's not just a thermostat. So I would encourage you to start out with the idea of what problem are you trying to solve? Don't just go in and install everything you can get because it sounds like a good idea, or Jennifer at Lincoln told you to do it because she had a good experience. Every property and company is a little different. So kind of start there. What are you trying to solve? Is it a labor shortage? Is it a leak issue? Is it a HVAC problem you have at a property? You go to companies like UDR, Essex, Aimco, the big REITs. They've really moved to self-service as a model. So that was their goal. They've reduced headcount by 1/3 to 1/2 across their portfolios through different smart technology solutions. Some of it's with us, some of it's with other platforms, some of it's self-generated internally. But that was their goal, was how do we reduce our labor across our companies? And they're seeing that now that it's not so much losing people, it's more about we can take people and fill our other vacancies that we already had in our open recs. So they're kind of repurposing their labor that's available. They've also seen a 30+% increase in NOI per head count. So they're getting a lot more out of the people that are employed. Rent control from Cecil is a good example, though. Pretty soon you're not going to be able to increase your rent. So you're going to lose a portion of that ROI right out the gate. We've got clients who know, maybe North Dakota is a good example. You can't get $40 more in rent because you put smart home in. So you have to start looking at these other factors of how else can I generate this revenue? Whether it's through different vendor partners, again, leaks in your properties. I would always just kind of start out on step one. What are we solving before you put it in? So you know what you can measure and get your ROI out of it at the end.
Yeah, and one of the things that was really stressed at OpsTech was, having a holistic approach. Vendors were just saying, you can't come to us with one-off problems or solutions. You really, as a company, have to look at your holistic approach. And to your point, what are you solving for? Tony, can you just tell us, I said a little bit in the introduction, but what are a few of the services that like a smart home company might offer that would be solutions for our operators?
Yeah, so big push we've seen recently is access control. There's a lot of aging access control solutions. There's also not a lot of integration of access control to other systems all the time. So we tend to start on the access control side and figure out, how do we get a person into your building? You think about self-guided tours. Step one, how do I get in the door? How do you get a resident in the door? How do you get a vendor in the door? So that's kind of a core concept here. Then you move into smart home, things like locks, thermostats, leak detection, light switches. And then we go into smart parking, building-wide Wi-Fi. We're moving into things like water meters, shut-off valves, things of that nature. So again, it doesn't all apply to every building. It just depends on what the goal is.
Yeah, and I can kind of piggyback off of that too. Greystar, large national operator, like Jennifer said, we have just under 8,000 units here in the Midwest. And like many operators, I'm sure you're all feeling the labor shortage as we are. And so a big problem that we're solving for is that. And through technology, we have really looked at how can we use that to ease our burden on site by optimizing and creating efficiencies in roles. And one way that we're doing that is centralizing positions. So it's essentially, basically getting somebody off site and centralizing them, a heavy admin role that would maybe be overseeing 3 properties versus on-site at 1. And how can we use technology to fill that gap on site without losing the people presence, the people feel, the customer service, which is never going to go away. And some ways we can do that in the prospect life cycle is going to be through AI chatting on the website, virtual tours on the website. You can schedule an appointment on the website, do a self-guided tour. You can apply online. So all of those steps, and in this demographic now where they don't actually have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, maybe they're texting with somebody online if it's not the website chat, is just going to ease their process, get their questions answered, and at the same time taking that burden off site. With the resident life cycle, similar situation. How can we become paperless? They can sign their renewals online. Package technology is another huge, just a huge topic. Obviously, a lot of properties have in the past couple of years went package lockers, package rooms. We've still seen a lot of burden on the on-site staff with those. So what's the next step? What's the next technology? We've been partnering with Fetch in some of our larger major markets. They're coming into the Twin Cities market, just starting out, and it's completely takes the package process off of the team, off of the office. The packages get delivered to a warehouse. The resident picks a date and the exact time they'll be home for their package to be delivered to their door. And that we get a premium on if we want, otherwise the residents pay directly for it. So it's not adding to our bottom line. Oftentimes we can add a premium to it to increase our ROI, and then also just cost savings on centralizing some of that payroll. Because really this, like Tony said, this is the direction it's going. So what can we do now and what things can we test to kind of get there?
Yeah, thanks so much. There was a lot of conversation also around integration, and it's really hard to get all of these different technologies to integrate. So, my recommendation, we're not going to talk about that here, but my recommendation is just to make sure that you have a really qualified consultant that is looking at it all the way through and through. Don't let your sales agent, your marketing person alone sell you on these technologies. You have to involve your IT all the way up, and you have to, as Tony said before, think about it holistically. I'm going to skip to the next topic, which is electric cars. This came up because I personally know more people that have bought electric Teslas specifically in the last 2 months than in all of the years before. So we're seeing a huge rise in that. How are we going to operate that in our communities? What does the future look like, and how are we future proofing our properties for those? So interesting statistic I found was by 2025, so 3 short years from now, 1 of every 10 cars sold will be electric. So 10%, and just a short 15 years later, it will be 50%. So if you think about the life cycle of our assets and the fact that 50% of cars will need electric car charging stations in 15 years, we really have to start thinking about future proofing our buildings now. So Mark, you are a developer, and I know you guys are thinking about this. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing, or maybe Jim go first? Jim's a huge Tesla fan, so watch out. Here comes a Tesla commercial.
Full disclosure, yes, I have 2 Teslas and actually a lot of Tesla stock. So here, go out and buy some Tesla stock. So, and our residents are also, they're aware of the great things of the electric vehicles. So, and one of the benefits, first of all, they're good for the environment. No more trips to the gas station, which is spectacular. I've got over almost 200,000 miles under my belt in electric cars, and they're just far superior to gas vehicles. No more oil filter changes. You start with a full battery, like essentially a full tank of gas every single day, which is great. And they're easier to drive. And then, of course, the big thing with electric cars is you're able to do more self-driving capabilities. And so Tesla already has it. Some of the other cars already have it too. And when we get to the point where it's actually really full autonomous driving, I think you're going to see, by the way, I think the numbers that you said here, I think they're extremely conservative. I think it's going to grow a lot faster than that. So anyway, when we get to the point where they're fully self-driving, people love to be on their iPads or computers or cell phones when they're in the car. And I think you're going to see it explode even faster than it already is. So the other thing too is they're fun, they're fast. And the latest Tesla called the Tesla Model S Plaid mode. And so it's a family sedan, and it will go 0 to 60 in 1.8 seconds, which is not fast enough for me, but it's getting there. So funny thing is they're actually coming up with a Tesla Roadster that'll have 2 warm thrust rocket boosters coming out of the back, and that'll do it in 1.1 seconds. So I'm going to try to get on that list too. So.
Okay, Jim, if I had known you had stock in it, I would have reeled you in on that.
Well,
Let's go to the Excel question that we have. We saw recently in the news that Excel is going to offer rebates for installing these car charging stations. Can you tell us a little bit more about how we might be able to get some funds to install these?
So Congress has just passed a $7.5 billion bill to try to get hundreds of thousands of car charge stations across the nation. And it looks like, and we don't know quite yet what the details are, probably in the next year, Excel will probably have some access to those funds. And so you're really going to have to look out for that for the next year. There'll probably be some cheap money available for us to put in these car charge stations. So, and right now there is really kind of 2 ways of charging, and that is you have the dedicated garage stall and you just charge a flat fee on that, like 30 to 80 bucks a month. But the other one is you get to more of a critical mass where 1/3 of the residents have electric cars. I think at that point, when you have 1/3 of them, then we're really going to look into more expensive and sophisticated pay per charge system in our properties.
Mark, you're looking at that really closely. You're building to, I think you said 5% of parking on day 1 will be electric chargeable. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing to make that happen.
Yeah, sure. We really pushed on this. We had a project in Madison, and their threshold was you have to have 2% electric car charging ready. And we're like, okay, it doesn't seem like that much. And then as we're going through looking at it, we're like, that's not actually going to get us there. I would say to bare minimum, I'd recommend folks start at 2% of your parking. Just start there. But look at your contingency number, and that's what you can look at spending there. Those are good dollars down the day. Because when we talk about parking, and this is as folks that back down parking, if you don't have a stall, then folks might not rent there. That's very soon going to be the case with electric car charging. There's very much a demographic shift where very few renters, at least in the Twin Cities here, had electric cars because, well, I don't have a place to charge it. So it's mostly resigned to single family homeowners. That is now changing. So I think there's an opportunity that folks can, you can use it as a marketing, this is absolutely, we have electric car charging. Folks still have stainless steel appliances as a unique amenity. So feel free to use electric car charging as a differentiator.
Good point. Good point.
It is nice.
You had talked about, it's not just about installing enough stations. It's about building the building to be able to accommodate it from a transformer standpoint and all of that. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we focus mostly on urban infill, so you're trying to get as much building as you can on site. Typically, you're then working on the edge to say, how do we get that transformer in that we need it to? Future proofing the building starts with how much power your property can actually get in. And that comes with transformer size. So spend some time with your electrical engineers, with your electrician, to make sure that you're sized to, whatever y'all feel comfortable with. I mean, if it is going to be a long-term hold, looking at, can this support 50% being electric car charging? I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be one of an acquisition checklist thing when you're going through each project and you have the acquisition folks. How many car charging can we get at the property here? So again, you're talking about differentiating yourself potentially on the exit and having a better value. And some groups may be, if it's below 10, we can't do it. We're going to pinch ourselves out of the market.
So there's some operational nuances to managing all of these stalls. Can you guys, I think a few of you have some examples of how you are managing it and the things that you're looking at in terms of rate and tracking.
Sure, I can start. Jim had mentioned, getting to more sophisticated program of the credit card charging. We've looked at that. We have not done any of our projects yet. We've looked at all, across the entire aspect. Do we have assigned stalls? Do we have it where you can use it for one day a week and then you're rotating with somebody else? Again, this is a management panel. A lot of it is trying to make things as easy as possible. And that best way is to do assigned stalls. That's going to be, you have one central station with a couple of cords, charging cords coming off it. Right now, we think that's the best way to manage it. There are going to be, as Jim said, absolutely, as this becomes more prevalent, more sophisticated systems, but right now, simpler is better. And doing that cost of, Jim said 30 to 80, we usually $50 a month to go and offset electric. It shouldn't, it's not going to be the profit generator, but you really need to make up for that utility expense every month.
Yeah, and I can touch a little bit on that too. I think this market, like many things, is a little bit behind on some of these pieces. So Greystar does a huge national robust reporting on what's really important to residents from our residents. And where we didn't see car charging stations as revenue drivers, it was definitely high on the list of occupancy drivers, which really kind of speaks to what everybody's been saying up here is people are going to want it. And if you don't have it, they're going to go somewhere that does. As far as managing it, I think for our market, it's too soon to tell. We have some properties that do the, pay per stall. If you have an electric charging station, you can have this stall. We add a premium to that. Those aren't always utilized as highly as we thought they would be. Where you go to another property, I know St. Louis Park last year was doing the rebates. So we had properties installing a couple in the parking lots, and they were more of an amenity. We actually weren't charging a fee. But as we get bigger into the market, absolutely, we're looking at the credit card charging machines. So that's kind of, I think, still to be vetted in this market, but it's absolutely going to have to get there and soon, I would say.
Nikki, do you have any numbers off the top of your head about what that premium might be so people can calculate some quick ROIs?
Yeah, so it was less than 50. I want to say it was like $30 premium on the stall. And like I said, they weren't readily grabbed up. So a lot of times they were sitting vacant. They might rent them out to somebody that didn't need the electric usage, with the caveat of, if somebody comes in with it, we'll have to move you. So right now, like I said, it's just, we're not seeing a ton of it, but year over year, we're seeing more and more anyways.
Yeah, it seems like there's definitely upside on that number as we have more cars and not as many spaces created. So anything else on electric cars before I move on?
Well, I thought there was an interesting anecdote on our call about where to put the car charging stations when it's an amenity.
Yes.
I'll talk about that.
It was everywhere from
Yeah. So
up
anyway,
close to all the way back.
so actually on the electric car charging stations, like when you go to Target, you see the Tesla chargers or Hy-Vee. They usually put it in areas of the parking lot that no one even parks at. So that's one of the benefit with our industry, where we have kind of a big demand for parking close to the building entrance. You can actually put these further away, and I think that the electric car owners are not going to be upset about walking a little bit further. Plus, usually from their cell phones, they can keep the car heated all winter long and cooled all summer long too, which is a nice benefit too.
You're a good sales guy. All right, we're going to move on. Thanks, you guys. We're going to talk a little bit about self-guided tours. One of the main things that I heard at Ops Tech, and I heard from this panel as well as we talked, was just self-reliance. Prospects want to be able to look when they want to look. And yet at the same time, 47% of people who do a self-guided tour also want to talk to a leasing professional either during the show or immediately after the show. So we're not talking about necessarily doing away with staff altogether, although there are some opportunities, as Tony discussed. So we did a really great job of adopting virtual and self-guided tours during the pandemic, right? But what we're hearing from our owners and managers is that just hasn't been as sticky as we thought that it might be. And so I'm just curious, did your guys' company experience the same thing? And if so, what are the barriers to it? Why isn't it more sticky, and why aren't more people adopting self-guided tours and virtual tours today?
Yeah, I can jump in on that right away. I have some stats here. During kind of the peak pandemic, well, I don't know if we're in the peak pandemic now, but when it first came online in 2020, everything was shut down. Nationally, about 30% self-guided tours. People were doing self-guided tours about 30% of the time. Locally here, that number was only a 5 to 10%. Once shutdowns lifted, we're now seeing only maybe about a 3% prospects doing self-guided tours. What we have seen in the technology realm to offset this is virtual tours. So we're using RealLink is a huge in the market. Your staff can go in, take videos of vacants, take videos of any room, common area on your property, and either email it, put it on your website so that your prospect from the comfort of their home can see the exact unit, the exact property. For cost savings, we've had properties even do YouTube videos, which cost you nothing. They might not be as fancy, but it's still solving the same problem. So I think really, if, like Jennifer said, if somebody's coming on site, they still want that little bit of people answering their questions, giving them a little bit of a sales pitch. So where we do see self-guided tours definitely as the future, it may be more of a hybrid. So you're taking burden off your staff. You're allowing your prospects to really get out there and see what they want to see. But bookending that with a leasing professional to answer their questions in the beginning and at the end, and also kind of allows them to go through that closing process. So I think also clients and our on-site teams need to be pushed into this realm a little bit. We've seen it very, as you can tell, more adaptive on the coast, and here there seems to be a hesitancy even from the clients and teams. So how do we educate them? How do we show them that this is going to be the future, and being able to present it to prospects as a benefit versus them not maybe wanting to do a tour? So I think that's going to be a big piece of it as it continues into our market.
Yeah, and I think to Nikki's point, we saw a lot when COVID really started that we started getting a lot of calls of how do we get people into a building? How do we get them in to see a unit? But it was out of necessity. As we went a little bit back to normal and you were able to bring people back in, there's a little bit of a hesitancy from a leasing staff perspective to say, here, let me remove myself from the equation and encourage you to take a self-guided tour. So a lot of it has been lack of adoption from a site level perspective, not necessarily offering it to a prospect. Also, to your point, from the coastal side, we've done a lot of studies as a company of, what is the appetite to do this? And in some cities, you'll see 85% of prospects would rather go on their own. Some it's a little different. So it goes back to my comment earlier about what are you trying to solve? What is the goal? Is it more about after hours because you're short staffed? Is it you're not open weekends, so you just need it to be available? It's not there to replace your leasing team. It's more about how do we provide the option to a prospect who wants to shop? Like you think about Walmart. If Walmart never would have adopted an online marketplace as they were a retailer, they never would have survived compared to Amazon. And that's kind of the trend the industry is going. It doesn't mean you just jump in and cut out your leasing team. Even UDR hasn't cut out their leasing team, but they're 98% self-guided tours across a 65,000 unit portfolio. But again, their purpose was self-service as a model, which may not be everyone in this room. So just kind of figure out how that fits in your operations process and where it makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the greatest pushback is from the on-site teams, and it's just a different way of doing things. So when you're gathering information, don't necessarily only listen to that. I think we as owners and managers need to be pushing it and realizing that there is probably more of a need than what we're recognizing, and that we just have to gently nudge the teams outside of their comfort zone in terms of that. Anything else on self-guided tours you guys want to touch on? I think it's great. I think really the bottom line was virtual tours was a lot more sticky than self-guided tours. Self-guided tours, the obstacles are the access, how do you check the IDs? And really those things, there's solutions for those, right? So if you solve for those, then you can push a lot more confidently on getting those self-guided tours.
Yeah,
So.
and I'd add on to that, Jennifer, that every self-guided tour provider, us included, has expanded those capabilities pretty significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. It didn't exist before that second week of March, and all of a sudden we had a product out the door in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And since then, it's definitely changed pretty dramatically to include a lot of those. So again, what are you trying to solve? What are the concerns? Make sure your vendor kind of hits on all those points.
And I think the third component you're trying to solve for self-guided tours is your CRM program. It's a little bit different when you don't have the leasing agent answering the phone or responding to the email. How does your CRM adapt to that? And so kind of the three things to solve for. Our last thing that we had on our list to talk about was sort of regulation and measuring energy. And, you know, there's just increasing regulation for us to measure it and to report it. And so just wonder if there's any tools, tips, or tricks you guys are using to leverage technology to help you do that more efficiently and smarter.
Yes and no. I think this is one area that there could be a lot of improvements made upon. There are a lot of cities now, depending on your unit count, that are requiring you to report energy usage through Energy Star, which is a great program. You get a rating. You could, use that for advertising and other items. We, as Greystar, we partner with a couple different companies, Conservice, AUM. They do a lot of things for us. As far as, we'll send utility bills to them. They create robust packaging. They do RUBS, bill backs for residents. But another item is that they will then send those reports and ensure that the properties are compliant with any of those kind of reporting requirements. Measurable is another one that does that. That's really tracking the environmental impact of it. And so while those are still fairly manual, they will also alert us to any big discrepancies. They see a spike in water that could be a leak that we need to investigate. Where we see more smart home technology, which really gets into then we're doing all of this reporting, what can we do with it and how can we improve efficiencies from it, is, I think Tony mentioned like the leak detection, the smart home thermostats, and there's a lot of companies right now that will offer this. I think Stratus is one that we've partnered with, that's very clean. You have a dashboard. As a management company, you have access to all of your vacants. So set them a schedule on their smart thermostat. So if a vendor goes in, turns the thermostat way high, it's on the schedule to go back down, or you can go and manually do it. Same with the light switches. And it also incentivizes residents because they can see this as well. They want to keep their costs lower. So they're setting schedules, they're keeping their energy consumption down. And then for our asset protection, the leak detection is huge. Installing water meters on water tanks or automatic shutoffs, which will in real time then alert you to a water leak. As most of you know, water loss on a property could be huge. It could thousands of gallons of water, thousands of dollars to mitigate. So that also smart technology wise is something that, you know, we're really looking into. And I think a lot of developers and owners are trying to see how they can implement that from the beginning to be able to just protect the asset from the outset.
One of the interesting takeaways from Ops Tech regarding leak detection was how to make sure that the vendor that you're using has a priority alert, because otherwise your maintenance guys get pinged for everyone. They don't know if it's a major flood or if it's just a meter that they can check in the morning, right? So really important to make sure that there is a really good system for priority alerting, or you burn out your entire staff on those leak detections.
Yeah, Nikki kind of stole my commercial. She did most of it for me. But I would just add on, it's kind of in the idea like self-guided tours, right? What human element can you replace? She mentioned vendors walking in. You think about painters who walk into vacants, turn your temperature up so it'll dry, walk back out. Lazy leasing agents like I used to be, no one walks it. Your temperature's at 90 degrees for 30 days and no one sees it. It's really in the idea of how do we automate that and take it off of your site team so it just happens in the background? How do you make your 5 clicks into 1 click and just have it, to Nikki's point, being your dashboard so it just happens without you having to think about it?
So all of these things, do they require Wi-Fi in order for them to work in the vacant units? I heard something at OpsTech about you still need Wi-Fi in the vacant unit. And if you don't have building-wide Wi-Fi, you don't have Wi-Fi in that unit when no one's there. How are anyone solving for that? How are we looking at that?
That's going to depend on your solution you're putting in. I mean, just from our company's perspective, we can do it on 3 different protocols. We can do Wi-Fi, we can do cell, there's Z-Wave, Zigbee, Bluetooth. It really just depends on what the goal is. We're trying to come out with more protocols to give you more of those choices. And I think a lot of different smart home providers are doing the same thing, because not every building has Wi-Fi. Not everyone has $2,000 a unit to put in bulk Wi-Fi, that obviously, so it just depends. And it depends on the piece of hardware you want to put in.
Jim, you had talked about fiber.
Yeah. So our latest renovation we did in Brooklyn Center, it's a tower, so concrete construction. So we work with Arbig to put in fiber there, and kind of the reason we did it is because we were converting a empty nursing, I guess assisted living housing into luxury housing. So it's really the first luxury housing in the city, but I don't have in-unit washer and dryer, so it's a little bit challenge for us to say that we're luxury units if we don't have in-unit washer and dryer. So what we did instead is we brought in super high speed internet with Arbig, and it's now we're up to 1 meg speed, and so it's super fast. You can download a movie pretty quickly. But when you do have a high-rise building with concrete, Arbig is good at this, but you do have to bring in X-ray machines to make sure that they're not hitting the cables in the pre-stressed concrete. That's a big problem. But we have probably enough speed and enough capacity through the whole thing so that we could probably put in a lot of these smart systems that we were talking about earlier here. But I think you're going to see more and more fiber going in, and we're probably going to do it to more of our properties too.
Awesome. We are at the end of our prepared questions. Jeff, if you have your next group that wants to start getting ready, like a couple more minutes. I know we're about 10 ahead of schedule, which I'm sure no one here would mind. There's a couple things on the agenda here that we hadn't talked about, but that just might be interesting. You probably don't have the numbers in front of you, but are you guys seeing demand for flexible lease terms? Are you seeing, more people wanting shorter lease terms? Are they willing to lock into longer? Has there been a shift, I guess, due to COVID, pandemic, or lifestyle changes where you've seen a trend that's obvious to you?
I would say we have not seen a trend to shorter lease terms necessarily. I think if anything, us as a management company have definitely been pushing people to longer lease terms, especially in the urban core where that rents are much lower than they should be, or your occupancy is lower. We're starting to come out of that a little bit, but let's keep this person in for, instead of a 12-month, we're doing a 24-month because we may not be able to fill this as quickly as we thought we would before. But we use revenue management for a lot of our properties too, which really helps us with the lease expirations and ensuring that if you're doing a shorter lease term, there's a premium to that, and really kind of filtering our residents into an ideal lease term for us, whether that's, spring, summer. But I haven't seen a huge increase in the requests for short terms necessarily.
And I'll say too, with us, people are just hearing the word inflation over and over again. And I think people are trying to lock in a good rental rate as they can. So I forgot to tie in on about the laundry in the units and the internet. That is because we didn't have laundry in the units. They were saying we weren't really a luxury building, but we said, we're going to give you free.
You're done.
They cut me
Sorry.
off. That's look.
You hit your quota of words.
Anyway, so I would say, do you spend more time on the internet or more time walking down the hall to do your laundry? And so obviously it's a great trade-off. So that was our sales pitch on that.
Yeah, on the lease terms, we're not seeing any difference either, but your point about inflation and residents seeing it, it's all over the news. They may be willing to lock in longer for lower. Cecil, you have?
Yeah, look, the only other, I saw on our meeting notes a little bit about operational costs, and we were just talking about energy, but I'm really concerned about property taxes and the property tax shift that could be coming because of office vacancy. I think 2023 could be really challenging as we see appraised values reset this year on office and the shift to residential. And so homeowners are going to feel it too, but I really think that's another big headwind that's coming for our industry and something that we all need to be paying really close attention to, and certainly talking to our tax appeal folks.
Good self-certified reason why rents might be more than 3%? Okay, awesome. All right, well, Jeff, if you're ready, that is it for us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.